Both the speakers and the moderators already arrived. Will be joining us any moment. Before that, I thought I'll tell you one or two requests to the youngsters. Excuse me. We wanted totally a business-like thing, just 1 hour and 15 minutes. Invest your time. Today we have got outstanding speakers, both Rajagopal as well as Tamaswati, who are going to be there today, and Tamaswati Ghosh and Prabhu Rajagopal. Listen to them. They are great achievers, and you will really know, especially Prabhu Rajagopal. If you're reading a newspaper, you will know India Today writes regularly on Innovation Sutra. He is one of the great mind in India on innovation. So you will listen from him. Before they come, another 2 minutes they'll come. Let me briefly tell you what's happening. And if you have any questions, there's a question slip available here. You can write your questions and give it to us. We'll pass it on. All the viewers who are watching online, very warm welcome to each one of you. There's a numbers flashed on your screen. If you have any questions, please share the questions. We'll be more than delighted to place all your questions before the panelists, and they will respond to all your questions. Only thing I'll request you, please focus the questions relevant to the theme today, what we are discussing. And before another 2-3 minutes, as they come, let me take this time to opportunity to brief you what's happening in MMA, especially for the visitors and some of the guests who have joined us, not members. 15th of September, we have an event on jointly with Flow. It's a Touch the Sky and Beyond, where Srimati Kesan, founder CEO of Space Kids, Jennifer Arul, you all know, famous TV commentator and author, Muthuvel Chelvi Narayanan, she is a Everest Summit conqueror. Carla Uni is my colleague from Air Force. This is happening on 15th September. 16th, we have again a great event. It's a very limited seats only available. My team will connect with you. Cabin Care MMA Chinni Kitchen Innovation Award. This is happening at IIT Research Park Auditorium. It's the most sought after. We already have 700 nominations filled up. The capacity is only 8,000. And yes, if you are lucky, few nominations we give to the college students, you can come and attend this. This Cabin Care MMA Innovation Award is happening at IIT Research Park Auditorium. And come, Ms. Shankar, please come. Gentlemen, big round of applause to dignitaries for this evening, the great achievers, speakers. Come, sir. Yeah. Yes. Then couple of events on Wednesday, Startup India Opportunities and Excitement. We'll tell you why we started this series, and man behind the series is already here with Mr. Shankar. We have got Devanshu Kumar of Solinas and also Swastik Saurabh Dash, then Sujata Srinivasan will be leading the conversation. That's happening on 20th September. We'll be doing quite a bit of work on startup series, basically for so many people who are students and also viewers who are sitting on the fence. You can take some firm decisions, whether it is this side or that side. I think it's a great insight for you. Then on 21st September, we have success story how it was done. Again, a great entrepreneur and Hot Breads Mahadevan. You all know, you all go to Hot Bread, eat puff and sandwiches, and you should know the man, what he has created in terms of business. Mr. Magalingam, President, may be leading the conversation with him. This is happening on 21st September. 22nd September, again, we have a book series led by Babu Krishnamurthy. This is happening on 22nd. This is not to be missed event. 28th September, we have Dr. Ajay Chowdhury. He is going to be discussing with us Just Aspire, Notes on Technology, Entrepreneurship and the Future. Ajay Chowdhury is a co-founder of HCL. And you know what is HCL today. We got two outstanding speakers along with them. We have Sushila Ravindranath will be leading the conversation. With M.M. Murugappan is also likely to join this. 30th September, again, we have an international speaker. I'm only telling till what's happening September. We almost done till November our events. In September, on the 30th, we have Busted Debunking Management Myth and Logic, Experience and Curiosity. This is a book authored by Ashok Soota. I know, any of youngsters who know Ashok Soota, you know, sir, you are seniors. Sir. Ashok Soota is the founder of Mindtree, and we have, along with them, Peter D. Jagger is, again, a management guru from Canada. And also have Sandhya Mendoza, she is again a co-author of the book, and we will be discussing again. We have a very good panel for this. Now coming to today's event, and ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed privileged to host this event series, and not only we are privileged to host because we are always been getting some outstanding achievers to come and speak, and you can, at the end of the session, you will know, good, you came here to listen to this outstanding personality. What we are doing this opportunities and excitement, it's all about startup series actually, because we strongly believe startup is very, very important for not only for employment generation, even for GDP growth, so many things. I know in between somebody got in the cloud. Our knowledge is only from newspapers. The funds are not coming. Some issues on governance, some issues on investors. So some of the investors, some of the startup has to resign. There's so many things that happen. I mean, there are many more points you can do that. But to demystify all this, we have an excellent panel here. You'll be leading a conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hat together to welcome Dr. Tamaswati Ghosh, CEO, IIT Madras Incubation Cell. We have Prabhu Rajagopal, Professor from IIT Madras. To lead the conversation, we have Manu, Iyer, Founder and Managing Partner, Bluehill Capital. May I request you please take your place, guys. Gentlemen, round, warm applause. I think we are not hearing. Get this a big round of applause. Once again, very warm welcome to all the viewers watching the program live, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. And if you have any questions, as usual, send your questions in the slab, but to the SMS, the numbers which is flashed on your screen. My team will collate all of them and place it before the team, place it before the panelists this evening to answer. Let me have the privilege of, the format of this evening is I'll have the privilege of introducing all the three, the panelists and as well as the moderator, and they'll be leading the conversation for about 45 minutes. Thereafter, we'll open the questions to the people who are present here first, and please write your questions, and the question slips and the pen is available here. Thereafter, we'll take the questions which has come online. Let me have the privilege of introducing Dr. Tamaswati Ghosh, who is the CEO of IIT Madras Incubation Cell. Tamaswati Ghosh is CEO of IIT Madras Incubation Cell and RTBI IIT M's Rural Technology and Business Incubator. She is a former Chief Operating Officer of Spurjet East Africa Limited, SEAL. And Dr. Ghosh graduated from Queen's University with a BA in Mathematics and a BE in Biochemistry, and received her MS in Structural Biology and also a PhD from Biophysics from Imperial College London. Very warm welcome to you, madam. It's a pleasure to have you this evening. Then we also have with us Dr. Prabhu Rajagopal. Dr. Prabhu Rajagopal is a professor of IIT Madras. Dr. Prabhu Rajagopal is trained at IIT Madras as a bachelor's and master's, and also Imperial College London at PhD postdoctorate. He is widely recognized for work on remote asset management in marine and energy sector. His work spans the spectrum of sensing, the data management, and leveraging innovations in AI, ML, and blockchain technologies. In his quest he has also co-founded several startups and licensed his IPs. And Prabhu is an associate editor of an international peer-reviewed journal, Ultrasonics, from Elsevier Group. And it's a privilege to have you with us, Dr. Rajagopal. Good to have you with us. Let me also have the privilege of introducing the moderator for this evening, Manu. One second. Mr. Manu Iyer. Manu Iyer is a founder, managing director of Bluehill Capital. Manu is an early stage investor in Inflection Point Ventures. He is also founder of, managing partner of Bluehill Capital. He is an electrical engineer from IIT Madras and MBA from Duke University. He serves on a strategic advisor board member of Detect Technologies, Mentis, Motivational, and number of other companies. He works closely with various deep tech ecosystem in India. He was a former associate IDBI Capital and former associate of Decision Point International. And Manu Iyer was also former business analyst with Cognizant. And Manu, it's indeed a privilege to have you with us. And today, it's a privilege. Very rarely I've seen MMA. A couple great achievers, Dr. Tamaswati and Mr. Prabhu, they are husband and wife. They are going to have, so you can do together so many things. It doesn't mean husband and wife working together will not be a success. Here is a lesson. So many of you youngsters, you have to get married, pick and choose the right one for you. Over to you, Manu.
Good evening, everyone. How is everyone today? Awesome. I hope you guys... so yeah, I hope you guys are as excited, for the next hour of conversation. So today we have a very interesting panel discussion, brought to you from the heart of where all the deep tech action is happening in India today, IIT Madras. More specifically, we have a power couple with us, both of them quite closely associated and well entrenched in the IIT Madras ecosystem. who bring their own unique perspectives to the table today. We had a brief introduction by Captain Vijay Kumar, but I'll go into a little bit more specifics. First, we have Professor Prabhu. So he's a professor at the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He's a specialist in non-destructive evaluation. He is a co-founder in a number of startups, and I think that's a very important thread that we can pull on. That would be an interesting conversation to kind of deep dive into. He is the faculty in charge at CFI, which is the maker lab and exploratory environment within the IIT Madras ecosystem, and it's something that I think has been very generously supported by our very own Shankar as well. And then he's also the faculty in charge at Nirman, which is IIT's pre-incubator and the so-called nursery for startups at IIT Madras. So that is a as brief as could be introduction about Professor Prabhu. And then we have Dr. Tama as well. And so as Captain mentioned, she's Professor Prabhu's better half. She's been the CEO of IIT Madras Incubation Cell for the last 10 years now, 10 years plus. And also the CEO of the RTBI, which is the Rural Technology and Business Incubator. And she herself is a PhD in molecular biophysics. And so while I mentioned that Professor Prabhu's Nirman was the nursery for startups, incubation cell, which, and I'll go a little formal here, I'm going to stop calling you doctor and professor. It's I'll call you both. Prabhu's Nirman was the nursery of startups. Incubation cell is where the rubber really meets the road, right? There's real money that is coming in via grants, investments, and loans. And at the end of the day, real deliverables are showcased. So that's basic context about both of them. And lastly, to kind of round up the IIT Madras story, I myself am an alumnus from IIT Madras Department of Electrical Engineering. And I manage a small early stage fund called Bluehill Capital. And so I'm also one of the more active investors in this ecosystem. So today on the dais, we have, starting from the lab all the way to investment, we have, an interesting train of thought and, that could kind of base the discussion going forward. So to set the stage, right, the IIT Madras Incubation Cell has thrown up multiple unicorns and many more are on the way, right? It is now a must-visit destination for every dignitary. I think we have hosted the Prime Minister a couple of times as well. Corporate titans, investors, diplomats. It's like you visit Tirupati, now you visit incubation cell also along the way. I think the last time I was there, I saw Charles was conducting like a session. I was like, what is happening? And he's like, no, UN diplomats are here, right? I'm like, okay, that's how it's become very commonplace. Right, so many different people are coming and visiting. And, the trigger for this interest, right, there is, something that has suddenly brought on all of this interest. And it's because of the deep innovation that is happening, within this ecosystem, right? From being, a quiet institution that was tucked away in the south, that didn't draw too much attention, right? Even back when I was there, and I'm guessing completely not so when, Shankar was there or, some of the earlier alumni were there. IITM is in the news today for a lot of the right things. 5 consecutive years of number 1, in the NIRF rankings. 7? Okay. 7 years, my bad. 7 years, consecutive. So, thanks to people like Prabhu. And then on the other side, he represents the, institution here. And then Tama is here from the startup side, all the excitement that is happening in the startup ecosystem, all the, the investment, the interest, the people, that whole ecosystem, so to say, right, that has been built today is something that is a very interesting thing that has come about, right? So let us use this opportunity, this discussion, to figure out what has gone right and kind of what the agenda is for this ecosystem going forward. So I'll just briefly stop here. I'll have Prabhu and Tamas just say a few words, from their own perspective, and then I'll go into questions, and then we can take questions from the audience as well. So, to you, please.
Is this working? Are you? Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. So thanks, Manu, for the very kind introduction. Thank you, sir, Group Captain, for the excellent introduction as well. Thank you, Mr. Shankar, for having us over here. So to start off with, very excited to be among you all. It's interesting for an engineering professor to be among a gathering of management professionals. So, and usually we come to you guys for wisdom, and today for some reason it's been flipped around. So I hope we can share something of interest to you. And IIT Madras is in a very, very exciting phase. We have had growth and development at breakneck pace. I myself am a recent alumnus. Okay, recent is maybe 20 years. I graduated in 2003, so just 20 years. So in these 20 years, the institute has changed beyond recognition. Even the hostels have been transformed, but fundamentally, a lot of the change has been led by, the place where she is there, which is the research park, and the kind of potential that place has brought in through industry and startup and academia, linkages and collaborations. So Manu mentioned that IIT Madras is transformed over the last few years. I think it is this thrust that has really transformed the institute. Of course, on one hand, there's been policy continuity. We have had great visionary directors and so on. And on the other hand, we have had this realization and understanding that, and in fact, Professor Anand, who was a director when I was a student, set out the first policy statement for the institution when he said, IIT Madras strives to be at a dynamic equilibrium with the society, industry and polity. When I first read it, the whole thing struck to me in the depth at which this was formulated. Even today, if you go to any department in IIT Madras, this vision is there. To be in dynamic equilibrium. It is not an equilibrium alone. We have to be able to look at the society's needs, industry's needs, and be able to deliver, appropriately, changing ourselves with times, with circumstances. So, it is this vision that we must be able to be relevant, be able to deliver something of use and need to the society and industry that today is making IIT Madras perform at the level it is performing at. And I'm very proud to say some of our work is at international level today. Sometimes it is even better than international standards. If we are succeeding in things like moon missions and we are a space power, nuclear power today, a lot of that has to do with places like IIT Madras, the IISc, and so on. So we are nurturing and promoting and striving to deliver excellence day in and day out. So yeah, so very excited to be here.
Awesome. Tama, please.
So, thank you, Manu, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Mr. Shankar, again, for inviting me to this wonderful session. It's my first time, being introduced to the association itself here. So my journey with the startup ecosystem, like Manu said, started 10 years back. That's when I had, returned to India after a long stay abroad. I left the country with my parents when I was very young. So returned to India, came to Chennai, and that was the year 2013 where the whole idea of an incubator from IIT Madras was launched, and that's where my journey began. We started very humbly. The idea was to just connect a few stakeholders within the institute and help some of our young startups which were just coming out of the institute, to help them to go to market and get some funding. And that's how we started our journey in 2013. So first year, I think we had about 10 odd startups. mostly within the IIT Madras student and faculty, pool. 10 years down the line, 2023, we have an ecosystem which houses close to about 350 deep tech startups. And today, the valuation of these companies stands at, and this is a one-year-old figure, 42,000 crores, which is about $5 billion US dollars. So we are extremely, extremely proud of this achievement. Many factors, and I'll keep it short so that, you can go straight to the questions. One, even though we started as an incubator of the Institute IIT Madras, very quickly, it went beyond the IIT ecosystem. Today, over close to about 60% of our startups are completely externals. They have nothing to do with IIT, but of course, as they become part of the ecosystem, they're part of the larger IIT ecosystem as well. And then, of course, the kind of work that our startups do. These are, one, we are talking about first-time entrepreneurs. Many of them are technologists, engineers, with no prior experience of anything in the realm of business. And these are the people we work with, Their strengths are, of course, technology. But we've been able to help these entrepreneurs over the years by creating this beautiful ecosystem where they take these innovations that are created at the backyards of their house or within some lab of their institute, maybe some from IIT Madras itself, and create businesses where products or solutions are sold at scale. They become commercially successful and even go on to raise these massive investments, not just from India, but from across the globe, right? So extremely proud of that fact, and we hope that we keep growing at this pace.
No, absolutely. I think the achievement has been, just mind-boggling. The scale, the impact, the presence that it has brought to both IIT Madras and the city and state in general. But one of the interesting things that Tama just mentioned was that, see, it is not an IIT Madras focused incubator, right? The interesting thing was they invited people who are doing interesting projects, technical projects from all over to say, hey, we're giving you the resources, we'll give you, support, we'll connect you to faculty, we'll connect you to industry. Why don't you come here and practice your, whatever subject, right? And so I think a lot of the success has been just from being an open interface, to the deep tech ecosystem. And I think that's been a core part of what has made it successful. So to start off with, and I think I have to pull that thread before Shankar pulls it himself. Is so Tama mentioned that she came here in 2013. I think that was the time when both of you finished your PhDs. Is that right? So do you want to quickly talk?
Yeah.
Approximately. So do you want to quickly, and I'll leave this open without, addressing it to either one of you, how you met, what was set the stage for the power couple introduction.
So I'll give a very philosophical story there. So you would have seen the Upanishad and it says, Om iti ekam idam aksharam. So that is, everything came from Om, the cosmic sound, right? Oh. So we had an introduction through sound as well. So the introduction was, so I was in the hostel. We were in the same hostel. She was a year junior to me, and I was in charge of sales of old goods. Basically, every year they sell things that have accumulated, also to help the newcomers. So we both had laid our eyes on the same speaker that was put up for sale, and I laid my eyes on it, and she had actually swiped it off before I could get it. And so we got into an argument. I said, that's mine, I claimed it. She says, I paid for it. So that's how we met for the first time, and we were in the same college, of course. So we met on a number of social occasions, And I am interested in Bengali culture. She is Bengali. And interestingly, that year, I had resolved that I will go to some Durga Puja pandals in London. So that's the first time I resolved. And interestingly, she was there. So I said, do you want to join me? So yeah, that's where things all began. That's how.
Any comments from Tama on this? Or
No, the speaker belonged to me, actually. I did pay for it.
so end off. All right. Super. So so let's kick things off with some questions. I have some structured questions, and then later we can take it to the broader audience. So Prabhu, so to kick things off, right? You, as I mentioned, is a founder in a number of startups. I think Planus, Solinas, Zyma, and Plenome. This is the healthcare records one. Okay, got it. And so, could you just walk us through the journey of how you kicked off on the startup side, right? I mean, there was at some time you came back and then you said, okay, this could be a commercial enterprise, right? From having completed your PhD, having been a student at IIT Madras, having worked in a lab, at some point you decided, okay, and I guess that start was with Planus, right? Okay. So to give you context, Planus is building underwater rovers, right? High level, 10,000 feet. They're building underwater rovers for inspection, for non-destructive evaluation. So this is a rover that could be used for inspections of dams, inspection of pillars, piles, things like that. And, before I get corrected, I will, transfer the mic to Prabhu. So how did that, transition come about?
Yeah, so Planus does inspections of marine structures. So river crossings of bridges, for example, most of the rail and road bridges of the country. In Maharashtra, the company has inspected more than 100 dams, 100 bridges. So, and today, Planus is also looking at data management. So historically started off with data gathering, but we're also looking at data management, prognosis, using data, using dashboards and things like that. So how did the journey begin? Usually it's, in the humble settings of a laboratory. So even when I came from Imperial, so I am very fortunate to be in a field where a number of startups usually come out of, like the non-destructive evaluation that Manu mentioned. We usually develop new sensors, new techniques for qualifying system structures, processes. In my lab at Imperial, I saw the birth and growth of 4 startups. So in my manifesto at IIT Madras, I had written that I will spin out companies and things like that. It was one of the statements I had made. But for the first 4 or 5 years, there was no support anyway. But when the incubation cell was formed, there is a lot of hope in the air. And I was working on this project together with Tanuj, who was now the founder and CEO of Planus, where we were developing a robot for inspection of submerged pipelines. And this was just a fun project at that time. Essentially, I was actually a mentor to Tanuj's team at CFI. And when it was time to do his master's project, he came up to me and said, look, I like your guidance. I would like to do my final year project under you. So I said, and then he wanted to do it in robotics. So I said, I've already done a land robotics project. Do you want to try underwater? So he says, yeah, that sounds nice. There is already a team in CFI that's working on underwater. So that team was led by Vineet, who's now the CTO of Planus. So he said, I would like to try this out. So in the 1 year, we ended up making 3 working prototypes of this robot, in which actually Mr. Shankar also has a pivotal contribution. So when I started making this robot, underwater robot, I did not have much funding because I was working mostly on the sensor side and none of my projects was for robotics. So we managed to get some funding through IIT Madras Alumni Association. So here is where our alumni network punches way above its weight actually. And Mr. Shankar was very kind to support us with a little check to buy some of the components that made up this robot. So his only requirement was you should graduate more MS PhD students, you should get more money and all that. I think, sir, I've satisfied all those criteria today by many factors. So, but at the end of the period, we had this beautiful robot. All credit to Tanuj. He stayed back for three more months after his project and made this really industrial version of this robot. So, and then I was very proudly showcasing this to everybody. Tanuj had gone on to Tata Motors. So, one day I had visitors from Reliance. Mr. Yuanand, who is a very senior person at Reliance Industries in Jamnagar, said, if you can make this work for oil tanks, I'll fund you. And that very evening, I called Tanuj and said, look, there's a lot of interest here. Why don't you just come back? Let's try exploring a startup in this domain. So he said, I will not come back without a team. Yeah. So I had to put together the team. So we were meeting Vineet and his group of friends at that time. And then we said, get together, guys. And that's how it was formed. It was a lab tool, but the real catalyst was the industry interest that was shown on that. And then finally, of course, without the incubation cell, I don't think I would have been confident enough to do it. So even, I was close to maybe mid-30s at that time. My father said, in Tamil, when I spoke to him, I'm going to create a startup. Hey, panadala way to That is the idea of startups even today, actually. But the fact that there is an incubation cell that provides structured support, the fact that there is some funding from industry alumni makes it possible for us to realize the dream of taking technologies from lab to the field, lab to the market.
That's awesome. So, I mean, and Planus is today building cutting edge robotics in underwater use cases. And, I'm glad to say I'm also one of their investors earlier. I mean,
thank you for this.
Oh, absolutely. So to jump off on that and, shift to Tama. So Tama, you've been CEO for 10 plus years, as we said. So could you contrast the scene, let's say back in 2015, 2016, after, a few years you've been around, incubation cell, right? There were very few real investors back then, right? In deep tech ideas, maybe, as Prabhu said, alumni were investing, and then there were a few angel networks, that were interested, and that was also, I think, just an agglomeration of alumni. And from back then to today, when every marquee fund is like trying to reach her and figure out what the next interesting hot startup is, and everyone is kind of making a beeline, right? So could you kind of give us where things were versus where things are, and that just compare and contrast maybe.
I think it's pretty much the startup scene in the country right now, right? So when we started in 2013, I think there were the whole idea about startups, right? It was probably concentrated to certain regions of the country, and that too in very specific sectors, right? IT primarily, right? And startup in those days meant an Infosys story, SaaS, right? So it was a very humble beginning for not just us, but the kind of startups that we onboarded in that period, 2012, 2013, that period, right? We sort of relied, of course, very heavily on the support that we got from the larger IIT ecosystem. So our immediate fallback, of course, I wouldn't say fallback, the people that we reached out to immediately were the alumni network, right? These are individuals that were fairly accomplished in their field, not just in India, but across the globe, right? And of course, primarily the alumni network that were there in the US. Now, the Silicon Valley was fairly mature at that time compared to what India was experiencing, right? So there was that feeling of giving back to IIT at that time. A lot of the well-to-do serial entrepreneurs, alumni entrepreneurs in the US who used to come and visit IIT Madras at that time felt that why not here as well? So we kind of caught on to that and leveraged that network. And some of the early startups that we had incubated in 2013-14, and now many of you would know their names as
Aether
well.
and
Aether Energy was one. The two-wheeler, the electric two-wheeler that you would find on the roads these days. So they were one of our early incubated startup. MediBuddy is another example, doctor consultation, So there were many of such, and then a little later, Planus, Detect Technology, they came along. In terms of the investment scene as well, tough, particularly the areas that some of our startups were working in. So again, we sort of, we did get a little bit of funding from the government, so relied on that. Reached out to alumni for some early, grant donations for our startups. And some of them went on to provide that early angel investments as well. What you see today, like you rightly said, large number of investors readily available, but I would say not, at some stage the scene has changed quite a bit, which is the early stage funding. It is much, much easier for startups with certain degree of innovation and some degree of, recognizing their market and having their early successes, and you will find investors very easily these days.
Right.
Lot more available at the kind of angel stage as well. So individuals have, I mean, the HNIs of the country has, in terms of percentage, has also grown, and they are more now less risk averse and more investing inclined towards startups. So the early stage funding has really gone up.
Right.
It's easier, much easier for our startups to kind of raise the, I think, under 10 crores kind of investments. But I think when you're talking about large significant investments, not much has changed. The requirements still remain the same, right? For a startup to really attract that kind of serious funding, you need to prove your product and your services in the market, right? And show it at scale, show that traction. So what we used to see in 2015, 16, 17, where startups after Series A had to really, be out there and work their way up to convince investors, I think it's pretty much the same. The great thing that has happened, and a lot to do with the maturity of the ecosystem, a lot to do with the, from the government as well.
Right.
The whole Startup India policy and all that came about from 2016. I think investors are more open to supporting the non-SaaS companies now, which has been a great, encouraging factor in what you see in ecosystem like ours today.
And people are willing to belt down and sit for a longer journey, right? I think that's the other thing.
So the other thing, I think this is something I've spoken to, and Mr. Shankar and some of our board members, in fact, have also talked about. The other thing is, the kind of startups that many of you should come and visit the research park and the incubation cell to see the kind of, innovation and products our companies are creating, it is a long haul.
Yeah.
I mean, the journey from their lab to market and then scale, it's a very long journey. So the kind of investments or the investors they need to have are quite different to the usual SaaS companies that you would find, right? And there is that whole idea of patient capital that comes in. The capital that comes to you, they need to be patient. They need to stay with you in that 6-7 years at least for them to see that the 10x, the X, increase in the valuation and all that, right? I think that part is changing a lot to do with individuals and family houses that are coming into this arena of funding. Right. And some of the VC funds also, I think, are becoming a little bit more open, but I think that ecosystem maturity is still required so that we are able to, support companies like Aether. Companies like
Agnikul,
for example. That's the first such space tech company that has come out of our ecosystem. You need people who are there for the long haul, right? And not kind of pressuring the startup to give me my 3x and my 4x and my 5x at any cost, and dilute the whole innovation and impact that they can truly make for the country and for the world, right?
Right. I remember, I think this was 2019. I was actually sitting with Professor Satya, and he was like, I'm glad that there are at least 2 people who are willing to sit and, take a conversation about Agnikul, right? This was 2019, right? And, from there, to literally the moon, right? So, the journey has been, absolutely
Just another
fantastic.
thing I wanted to add, we were very fortunate in the early years where the investors that we talk about started their journey with us as mentors.
Yeah.
So they were involved in the ecosystem first, and they were committed and involved in the startup's journey literally.
Yep.
And they played a huge role in the success of the companies. It was not just capital infusion. That trend is changing quite a bit with the,
Yeah.
but particularly in the early stage funding. That's where the inputs are so critical for entrepreneurs, right? With the increase in number of investors and these so-called funds and angel groups and the AIFs that have come up, you're getting the money, but where are
Not
the
so much
people? There
the,
is no face to these funds, right? So I think that's where investors have just become strategic financiers, kind of.
right.
And the early stage, that involvement of investment come mentorship has gone down. But I think that's where the incubator can play a larger role, and that's what we are kind of trying to do.
No, absolutely. I think the fact that an investor today is willing to buckle down and say, okay, I'm willing to wait 7, 8, 10 years, to potentially see a return, on a company like an Agnikul or, some of the others down that chain where there is no real question of, what is revenue, right? You just can't answer that question, right? And today there are multiple people willing to take that bet. So that is, a fantastic evolution in that ecosystem. So jumping back to Prabhu, right? So as an academic, right? And I think this is the only technical question that I'm really going to go into. So there is a thought process of, solving a problem, right? But when you're in a lab, right? Are you thinking, hey, I'm solving a problem? Are you thinking, hey, does this fit into the thesis of putting out a paper? Are you thinking about commercialization at that point? I'm sure this has changed between, 10 years ago and now, right? So could you kind of think through that process for us?
So, can I answer with an equation?
Absolutely.
Mr. Shankar has proscribed me from stating an equation, but maybe I'll reply in German. Jokes apart, it's a very beautiful question. So actually, when I am solving a problem, I'm just solving a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So it depends on the stage at which the solution is. I know Mr. Shankar again has asked us not to talk TRLs, but you can think of solutions in the stage of ideation, in the stage of implementation, in the stage of maturation, right? At the ideation stage, a lot of my and not just for me, any academic, their big ticket funding comes at the ideation stage. Like for example, the Department of Science and Technology may not be very excited about me building a robot to inspect a bridge, as opposed to coming up with a smart material that can withstand maybe 2000 meters pressure that can be used to build future robots. So there is a lot of research at the ideation stage. I think almost 30 or 40% of my work is at that fundamental level where we can make cutting edge advances. I work on metamaterials, I work on quantum sensing. So these are topics that have maybe several years of maturation cycles. So, but to come back to your question, as somebody who's involved with technology translation, how I have started working is that I therefore allocate my R&D spectrum hedged in this way: 30-40% fundamental research, 30-40% is like translational research, and then remaining is commercialization.
But is this something that the broader academic fraternity is also doing, do you think, today? Is that something that translates?
No. So in fact, at IIT Madras itself, I think our former director, Professor Bhaskar, came up with this beautiful, spider for evaluation, spider kind of a thing. That is, an academic can be considered to be successful if he is good at 2 or 3 of this kind of thing. Like you can be good at teaching, you can be good at research, you can be good at admin, you can be good at service, you can be good at industry interactions, you can be good at startups. So about 2 or 3 of these right? So therefore, there are academics across the spectrum. Some really love their fundamental work. Some really love their translational work. People like me, I like to do a bit of both. I like to do a little bit of fundamental research, which is why I have this national fellowship to study sound at the quantum scale, the Swarna Jayanti fellowship. Right. On the other hand, I also like to see my ideas in action.
Right.
I don't want them to die in the lab.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Tama, so what do you think are the few things that IITM incubation cell has gotten right to put us where we are today, right? I mean, you mentioned alumni, you mentioned mentorship, you mentioned support of the institution, but this is there everywhere also, right? So is it that we are a lot more connected? What is it, what are those things that, give us that alpha, so to say, right? What is putting us that little bit extra ahead of everyone else that today we are considered India's number one, deep tech incubator?
No, I think we've been a little fortunate as well. So what you just said about this is there everywhere, I don't really agree with that fully. More so because in the recent times, we, as part of our kind of our 2.0 of incubation cell, we've been reaching out and partnering with large number of institutes and incubators across the country.
Yep.
And some of them are incubators or institutes, very old institutes, and both in the private and the government sector, and have had their incubators probably for the last 10 years, 15 years, some of them, and have hardly made a mark.
Right.
Right? Not that they don't have alumni connects to government, and some of them have actually received huge amounts of grants from the government. Fortunately or unfortunately, we were not that lucky, and we barely had much funding support in the early days. We probably started with a couple of crores and had to build things from ground up. So what makes this place so special, and special in the sense, how did we manage to do what we did in 10 years time, and very recently, I think one of these, so many ambassadors and all that had come, the Bangladesh High Commissioner had come to our place, and we usually, we're very sheepishly, kind of say that it's taken us 10 years, 12 years, thinking it's taken us too long, and I was kind of explaining that to him, and he's like, what? That's too short of a time. I thought you were talking about 20, 30 years or something, Anyway, so I think we got the fundamentals right.
Yeah.
Before we can sort of preach or say that we are going to go and help startups scale, we too had to experience that whole journey, right?
Right.
And so incubation cell and the research park, we pretty much grew like a startup. Very little funding support, identifying our customers, who the market is, who are our clientele, working in a very lean model.
Right.
And focus, unlike IIT Madras, where R&D, teaching, these are the sort of the central point. Here we were very clear from the very beginning, which is commercialization is the focus here.
Right.
So for any startup to be successful, impact, all that is good, and they will make that when they become big at some point. I think the fundamental is they are there to make money. A startup to be successful, they have to generate cash.
Sure.
And that is what we kind of teach, inculcate, practice. And this is what we have been trying to do with every startup that gets incubated at the incubation cell. And we do that thanks to the stakeholders, and this network that we have created of mentors who align with our way of thinking,
Yep.
So mentorship and leveraging our mentors to help our startups to think towards commercialization from day one is, I would say, the key ingredient to success that you see here. So whether it's a Agnikul or a Aether, of course, their journey, it's an incredible journey, or even a Planus for that matter, Solinas for that matter, New Motion with their wheelchair and everything. many years of R&D, and that will continue as they keep refining their product, coming up with new product, but making sure who they're building the product for, and will there be takers tomorrow once the product is ready, and they would be willing to pay at the price point that they are thinking of selling. Those are things that we try to inculcate from the very beginning.
Right.
And we've been very fortunate, like you also pointed out, the kind of mentors that we have created. Yes, at the beginning, thanks to our alumni, but I think our mentor network now goes beyond that. We leverage our industry partnerships. The diversity is very important, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the technology domains, but even people with management background, right? And we are constantly in the lookout for individuals who want to come and spend time with our startups.
No, today it's actually aspirational to be an IT Madras incubation cell mentor, right? So it's the other way. But no, I think that's a very interesting answer in that, incubation cell itself has grown like a startup. And I think more importantly, a very lean one, right? Even though I think you started with 10 startups, today you're saying 350 startups. The team, I can still, if I wander around that ecosystem, I'll bump into Tama eventually, I'll bump into Jaya, I'll bump into, the same people. Yeah, and, it's not like, the team is like grown in proportion to the number of, stakeholders that have, now touched the ecosystem, so to say.
So I just wanted to add, like I said, we started with a couple of crores of infusion from the government. Some fortunate to have alumni, some donations, which helped us to, provide seed funding to our startups.
Absolutely.
Today we are actually, the incubation cell alone is generating on average in the last couple of years, 10 to 12 crores a year. And these are not donations, not grants from any government body.
Yep.
These are exits that we are seeing from these little shares that we buy at the time of incubation. And of course, I wanted to highlight startups that get incubated in our ecosystem. We do take small equity at the very beginning, and that's all.
That's all, yeah.
We don't charge them for any of the support that we provide through their journey.
Yep.
And that is reaping benefit.
No, absolutely.
And creating cash for the ecosystem. Yep. And through that, we are able to sustain our activity. So we are growing like any other commercial entity.
No, and I think, sorry, Prabhu, you'll have to wait a little bit more while I pull this thread.
With pleasure.
So the interesting thing, right? So I think last year, March, there was Medibuddy had come in and, I think given back a check to Incubation Cell for 14 crores, right? Medibuddy is, I think, now unicorn-ish, okay, unicorn-ish startup. And they came back and they gave, handed off a check to Professor and Tama and 14 crore check. And this is one, like she mentioned, one among many such exits that are happening, people coming, with further rounds of investment, people are buying back the shares from Incubation Cell. So, and I know, from conversations with Professor and, yourself that, there isn't an interest per se to want to exit also, right? Given an option, you still want to stay, right? So can you talk through that thought process? Because, 14 crores is a lot of money. And I'm seeing that, it's going to start paying off more and more as you kind of, over the next few years. I think that pipeline is now looking pretty solid, right? So how would you think through that, exit or not to exit plan?
In fact, I was remembering this when the Medibuddy check was given to us. There was, it was at some book launch or something, it happened.
The IIT Madras entrepreneur book launch.
Yes, and there were some reporters right there.
Yeah.
Who usually, as happens, got half of the information. And the next day the story comes out and I'm getting a call from director's office.
Yeah.
Saying, what is this donation that Research Park got that we don't know about?
It's actually so as my part, research that I was trying to do for this thing today, the articles are still up there that say it is money that is donated, by the way. Financial Express still has it up there that says Medibuddy donated 14 crore.
In fact, what happened was there were some sort of inquiry from some of the alumni as well that is Research Park and Incubation now started collecting donations from their startups or something, So we had to kind of correct that story. It's a beautiful story of what I was trying to say earlier, where we usually, if you come to incubation cell, you will find these early, 20-year-olds working their heart out, with a vision in mind, and then, of course, large number of mentors, sometimes faculty members working with them, years and years. They go on to then, see all kind of ups and downs and all that, So that's sort of the story you see right all across, startup journey. And Medibuddy is no different, right? I remember the number of pivots that the startup went through. I mean, they started with a ECG, a mobile ECG set. That's how they started, in a lab at Professor Ashok's, Professor Ashok Junjunwala's, sort of department, and their entire, like the 7-8 years journey to what they are right now. Of course, unlike most of the other incubators that you would see in the country, we are there with the startup for the long haul. Even though the incubation program per se will be like 2 years, 3 years, you have to definitely define the program, but we are with the startup for the long haul. So majority of companies that we are with are like 7, 8, 10 years, they were at a critical juncture of a big merger that was taking place, So they were acquiring another company in the health tech space, and there was this huge pressure from their incoming investors to exit out some of the older investors. So with a very, very large heart, kind of heavy heart, they came to us and said, if you don't mind, please, but can we please stay connected and be part of the ecosystem, even though you will no longer be our shareholder. Enba and Satish, the two founders, are now mentors to many of our younger companies. And this is sort of the story with most of our older startups, In fact, some are of the likes of Unifor and Stellapps. They are board members. They are members on the board of IITM Incubation Cell. So now we are learning from our entrepreneurs, And many go on to, as I said, mentor our startups. Some of them have become investors.
Yep.
Tarun Ethar has invested in
Absolutely.
many of our younger companies. So that's how the sort of the feedback loop has been created. And the ecosystem is just growing and growing, and I hope, and this gives us the confidence now that we can go beyond the ecosystem that we have created here, and we are reaching out and going to these smaller tier 3, tier 4 towns right now, going to the smaller universities, incubators, and see what all can we do for the greater India.
No, absolutely. And, not to kind of preach to the choir here, but I think the most successful startups have been the ones that have been able to pivot, right? I mean, the companies that we have invested in have, quickly changed, adjusted to the market situation, adjusted to what, direction that they're getting from all the external forces, and kind of quickly moving on to, shifting gaze, shifting direction, and evolving, so to say. Prabhu, I'll just come to you, and then we'll maybe get into what looks like a lot of questions. So as part of your engagement with CFI and Nirman, right, you work with a lot of students and faculty as well. So how has the attitude kind of towards, working with, for a startup or working with startup, how has that attitude evolved, right? I mean, and this goes back to your own conversation with your father you just mentioned, right? So how do you think students are thinking about it today?
So, so Nirman is our pre-incubator. CFI is the maker space, as you said. Indeed, there is a culture shift, actually. Whereas I can say 10 years ago, when I first started or 12 years ago as an academic at IIT Madras, it was far more difficult to motivate people to try and consider startups. So Tanuj himself went off to take up a job, for example, and he said, I'm not coming back until I have a team. So now CFI and Nirman help them to work together in teams, help them discover their potential co-founders and so on. Among the faculty, being a startup founder has become an aspirational thing. A lot of faculty members want to create startups, try to spin off their companies. Sometimes it also happens the other way around. Faculty are looking for founders and they don't have somebody
Someone to
who's
take it and run.
taking it up. So we have a beautiful program called MS in Entrepreneurship that sort of addresses that gap. Faculty can go list their ideas and students can join a startup. So generally, there is a culture shift. People are more open and positive to startups, and there is also, they recognize that there is a lot more support. Whereas in few years ago, I will say something. Yesterday or day before yesterday, we had a session called Ask Me Anything, where now our current call for pre-incubation is ongoing for the last 2 weeks, and it's on for one more week. And we invite students to come and raise their doubts and questions. So somebody in the audience stood up and said, "Sir, what is the special thing that Nirman is going to give us that we should come here?" So now it has become a question of not just they want to be entrepreneurs, but they're also sampling and seeing what is being given here as opposed to somewhere else. Actually, so that kind of awareness is also spreading. So entrepreneurship is taking deep-rooted presence on the campus. The very fact that today we have to differentiate post and pre-venture, the fact that I also have to create a large pre-venture setting to match the post-venture setup speaks volumes of where we have come actually.
That's perfect. Yeah. Quick question back to you, Tama, and then so as someone you've seen, we've spoken a lot about the success of the ecosystem, right? Could you talk a little bit about the failures, right? Without maybe naming names, maybe what went wrong. I know founders not getting together, getting along is a big thing, right? I mean, not gelling along is a big thing. Maybe if you could talk to a little bit about that, what has gone wrong, and what could be done better there.
So before that, usually we don't really highlight this, but lately I think we are encouraged by our board members to highlight it as well. That very unique about our ecosystem in the country or even in the world is the number of success rate in incubation cell. We have 82% of our companies have survived. And many quite successful, like I said. Usually you will see the other way around, the percentage across India or across the globe, the failure rates are extremely high, and which is something quite the opposite here. Of course, there are many reasons why a company may close down, shut down, decide to disband. Of course, founder issues is one of the key. But I think, again, when they start off something without the fundamentals being there, that leads to all these kind of...
Downstream.
Downstream. And founder problems is a downstream problem. Usually it doesn't start from day one, right? Because people do come together with a certain vision in mind. But of course, missing that it is not about creating great technology. And I'm talking from the experience of our ecosystem. It may be different somewhere else, but at least from our ecosystem, it's not so much about creating this fabulous technology. And there should be takers. Just because I have created something great in my lab, which works beautifully, so it should sell, and then investors should line up. That's the kind of thinking that many people, and particularly when you're dealing with the first-time entrepreneurs at their early days, and few months down the line, they realize where is the money to do any of this.
Right.
And that's where founder issues kind of start off, right? So many of the 20% that we've seen have decided to close shop is because they gave up too quickly, or they couldn't go through that hardship. They were not prepared mentally that... See, when we talk about entrepreneurship and the success stories and all that comes to your mind, right? An Agnikul may come to your mind, an Aether may come to your mind. But people forget the number of years they've taken and the perseverance and the hard work, literally. Years and years of early years where the founders go without any salary because they are trying to pay their employees. The kind of conditions these people go through, right? So, many people, when they start their journey, they have this beautiful, this vision in their head that entrepreneurship is all like, you come up with a great technology, then investors line up, and then you get these huge valuations. That has never been the case, or at least we try not to, and sort of demystify this whole idea about what startup creation is all about, right? So I think a lot of the failures we've seen is as a result of that misfit that has happened, the product market fit, not realizing the price point that is required for your product or your service to outcompete the competitors there and all that. And then the lack of funds.
Right.
And then the founder issues begin, and they are not able to resolve. People just sort of disband, go take up jobs, because it is really, really hard journey where you barely make 10,000-15,000 a month, because you need to pay the 2-3 other employees in the company, or they leave, So these are usually the reasons why companies shut shop very early days. Of course, later days, it could be all kind of, again, market success, traction, right. Scaling doesn't happen, you run out of money again.
Yep.
So it's sort of,
yeah,
it is related
cyclic
to the fundamentals again, that you are not able to generate cash.
Got it. No, actually, to that point, while everything looks all nice and fancy, right? I think Tarun even mentioned, Tarun Aveta, that there were at least 3 times when he didn't know, how he was going to make payroll, next month, right? And, persevered through that. Awesome. So we'll go quickly into the questions. I think the first one, I think you've kind of answered it, but I'll, from Shankar, can you speak to the rate of success of the IITM IC startups against the common perception that 9.5 of 10 fail, and why?
I think I sort of,
you sort of went there.
Covered that.
Awesome. How can government and private sector collaborate to further improve policy framework? Do you want to take that?
So here I assume that
Murugan.
Universities are also being thought of as government. Yeah, I can't answer for government, but I can at least say how can university and the private sector collaborate. I think there is a lot of mistrust still between industry and academia. I don't know, really how to address this, because IIT Madras is one of the institutions that has been working very closely with the industry. We have had the Center for Industrial Consultancy and Sponsored Research celebrate 50 years this year. 50 years ago, they thought that this is important actually. But I think somewhere the kind of jargon that is used, the kind of language, the kind of work culture that is there, academic work culture tends to be a lot more relaxed, lot less driven by certain targets and outcomes, and far more driven by interest, curiosity, and the idea to innovate. Whereas the industry cycles tend to be focused on targets, outcomes, funding cycles, deliverables, and so on. So I think if there is mutual respect and support, I think both are needed. Academia needs to understand and learn from industry on delivering on targets, on focusing on the immediate, here and now. Whereas the industry also needs to appreciate that the real knockout benefit comes from these kinds of innovations that take many years to catalyze. So as long as that mutual respect is there and there is a willingness to work together, I think this bridge can be solved. And to a large extent, policy also works in this way. Policy has to understand that academia cannot become industry. We cannot become cash cow, deliverable. I'll give you X amount of funding, give me Y amount of startups, so many amount of patents. It's not going to work like that. On the other hand, industry also you cannot say, okay, today I have given you so much funding, tomorrow you become the Google, Facebook, and Apple of the world. It is not going to happen like that. Each have their own strength, and the policy has to be framed in such a way that these two different pillars of the knowledge economy work in sync and in complementarity to each other.
And I think, if I can just add one thing to that, right? I think there are PSUs who have been have been supportive of the ecosystem, right? And, while there is a mandate from the government to say, hey, you guys should participate, you guys should support the ecosystem, I think there is still a large white space, a large gap in them wanting every single I to be dotted and every single T to be crossed. And that's just not there in the startup ecosystem. You just cannot expect that. And I think at some level that starts becoming detrimental. It's over giving them cash. You start, dealing with their management and their team, who are all, like in it for the long term. They are looking to ensure that nothing goes wrong in their tenure, right? And they just paranoid about the entire thing, AGMs, EGMs. So there is a gap. I think there is, and I think that's not a very easy gap to kind of bridge without a lot more flexibility going into these guys' thought process or these guys' organizational structure itself. How have startups impacted job creation? What type of jobs are being generated? Generic. Vetri from Coimbatore.
So
We can
I'll start
quickly-
off and then you can add on. I think startups shouldn't be be looked at primarily from the job creation perspective. Yes, startups do create a lot of jobs. I think Incubation Cell, you quote a number of what, 10,000 jobs or something?
10,000 plus
10,000
direct
plus,
jobs.
jobs being created. I was once asked to do an article on how startups are working to eliminate unemployment in the country. I couldn't get enough statistics to show that actually. So startups are not going to be job engines as much as a TCS or an Infosys with a large project to deliver on. On the other hand, startups may become the engine to feed such a growth eventually. So, for example, if a Ather is creating a excellent optimized electric battery, tomorrow that tech could be at the heart of a futuristic electric vehicle. Or Agnikul, if they succeed in what they are doing, tomorrow they are going to create a lot more opportunities for future exploitation by the industry. So, startups are market discovery entities. They are not primarily job creation engines. So I would disagree from the the general notion in this respect. Both of you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree with him to a large extent. I mean, it is not the responsibility of startups to generate employment for the country. I think that should be the role of the large industry.
Further downstream, yeah.
Further downstream, yes. But like he said very rightly, they are the trendsetters. They can literally transform an industry at a pace that an established industry never can, right? And that can have a ripple effect where you create verticals, I think new industries altogether, new streams where a large number of youth can get absorbed, right? So, and it also gives them a platform for the youth to create new things.
Ather itself is an example. Right? 10 years ago when Ather was talking about electric bikes, even I was thinking, isn't that like overdoing things? Today you have Ola Electric, you have TVS Electric, you have Bajaj Electric, right? All of them. And Ola Electric produces at a scale far bigger than Ather, is still dreaming of actually.
Yeah.
Right? So, can I say Ather actually was a pioneer that opened up this segment? I think I can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would take offense if you didn't. I mean, but yeah, no. I think that's helpful. There's a question about IITM's contribution in AI and chip design. I know, I mean, Professor Kama's team and they work on Shakti and, the ecosystem around it he's been building for a long time. I don't know if you have a little bit more color on that. You work with the Robert Bosch Center as well, right? So I think you might have some color on the AI piece.
Long before anybody was talking about AI and data sciences, IIT Madras created this Robert Bosch Center for Data Sciences and AI, RBCDS almost 6 years ago. And I have been associated with the center since its founding. And I can say that, IIT Madras has made both fundamental as well as translational contributions in AI. First of all, by, sensitizing the industry and community to this whole new developing field far ahead of others, much ahead of others. Today, IIT Madras boasts of at least 5 centers focused on data sciences and AI. There is RBCDSI, there is also the American Express funded Center for Data Sciences. There is two or three more I'm not able to name at the top of my head. On the other hand, chip design is something that
analog devices
has
has
been
a
evangelizing for a long time. You've been a student in electrical engineering. You know Professor Butt and his group on devices way back in the 90s. Actually, at a time when nobody even thought about making semiconductors and chips and devices in the country. The electrical engineering department at IIT Madras had some of the most state-of-the-art centers for this, and I think all of that is now coming back through the Shakti processor. And today we are also trying to catalyze a cluster on semiconductors. I in fact lead now a vertical in our department. Our department has reorganized itself as per my own vision statement. We now have 7 verticals. One of these verticals is called Smart Manufacturing and Advanced Materials, and our theme is semiconductors.
Awesome. And it speaks to, I think, the startup culture that the department is now reorganizing, right? I think that's also interesting. Is funding critical in incubation? I think I'll just answer yes. I think, and today there's a lot of funding that's available. I think today there's, relatively easy money to where things were maybe.
It's not the ingredient for success.
It's not the ingredient. It says critical issue for incubation. I mean,
critical issue for incubation. No, I don't think it's.
I mean, it will, okay. Critical to incubate, no. But I think sources of money today are there to try out, I think, to explore, to get grants. I think IC gives loans as well. So I think relatively easier to do, to be incubated today than it was. Would you agree, Tama? Or am I conflating issues?
I don't know what you're saying.
No, I think.
Is it relatively easier to get incubated?
Is it relatively easier to get funded, I think, with...
Funding was never the, I think, evaluation criteria ever for us to incubate a startup, And in fact, even today, we don't promise any kind of funding support when a startup gets incubated. And you have to show it through merit and pass a committee to get funded. But it is easier.
None of my startups have been funded. Not a crib there.
Yeah, but that's not the reason for failures, actually.
Got it. What are some startups that have disrupted traditional industries? I think, I think there's a lot of, do you want to talk about
modulus housing,
modulus.
For example, and Twasta, these are 3D printing,
3D printing,
assembling modular houses, Tan 90 producing
cold
modular
packs,
cooling solutions, right? And then
Detect.
And then you have Galaxy, which is trying to do space satellite-based telemetry. Of course, Detect, Solinas, Planis, and Zyma, each disrupting their own business. Detect has pioneered the concept of health and safety, occupational health using edge devices, AI devices. And then you have Zyma, which is doing high temperature sensors based analytics and so on. So every one of them is a pioneer on its own. Yeah.
What role does foreign investment play in startups? Is that something that you're thinking about?
I think it would play a role at a much, much later stage. I think when you're talking about private equity kind of funding and all that, I think early stage funding, there is enough wealth in the country. I think when we are...
I think just to sort of answer that question in a very different angle, a lot of early stage funding in the country is local, but I think a mid to large scale funding is still foreign in its origin. So where foreign capital plays a role is VCPE stage, of course, which is very large scale funding, but even, ticket sizes between 10 crore to 50 crore, those tend to be nominated by funds that are offshore based.
Right.
And I think that's an aspect that we need to crack as a country to make sure that more capital is available in that segment locally so that we can try out original ideas that benefit us rather than ideas that are working elsewhere, which is what these foreign funds tend to be typically supporting.
Sorry, Tama, you were saying.
No, I'm just saying foreign funds also comes with its sort of their bit of a downside as well, because many a times startups are sort of influenced to leave, relocate,
Right.
leave and set up somewhere else. And that's not good for the country, you know. So a lot more of the local funds, local funding groups are required within the country, you know.
Right.
In the larger funding segment.
And also policies around it, taxation policies and all. That's one of the other major reasons why many a time startups at a much later stage, you know, they have to kind of
Shift base.
shift base and all that.
Awesome. So I think we're ready to wind down, and so I just have a couple of just one question for both of you. So you, I think, Tama, as a CEO, you have a constant barrage of people trying to seek your attention, seek your inputs. So what is it that you do to kind of keep yourself grounded in your downtime? And then, same question to you.
You have met and been with Professor Ashok Junjunwala.
I have,
right?
yeah.
And those who haven't, I think when you're with him,
There is no downtime.
No. So I think he turned 70 this year.
Yeah, retiring next year. Yeah.
And you will still find him in the corridors and on the steps of Research Park doing the simplest of things that you can think of. So I think we've learned from that.
Right.
Second, I have a great team within the incubation cell. So like you said, I do have to deal with a large number of people every day, but I think they do a fantastic job at the incubation cell. So if you can't reach me, there will be 3-4 other people who will do equally good or not, if not a better job.
Absolutely.
So I would just say that all of you here are welcome to come and experience the place, spend a day with us, particularly the younger lot here. You should come and meet and interact with the entrepreneurs that we've been talking about, the startups that we are talking about. Majority of them are still there at the research park, have their base at the research park, just to see what are the alternatives, what are the alternative careers you can have. Not all have to, create a venture of their own, but you can be part of this sort of the startup culture, the startup environment, as opposed to working in a established company like the TCS and the likes, right? And you never know, tomorrow you'll be creating the next Agnikul or the next Aether. And I really would like to welcome all of you, the youngsters, to come visit us. And not leaving out the non-youngsters. You're still young at heart. So you must come and visit us also, and anything, like I said, we are constantly in the lookout for individuals who want to be part of our, large family of startups. Wherever we find that they can be of help to our startups, we kind of
Absolutely.
keep them with us.
And just to add to that invitation, right? It's not really going to add anything to her plate, right? There's a set system, right? People just come in and your walk through, like these Europe, you have these museums, no? You give you the audio thing, and then if you stand here, this is this startup.
Yes.
That setup is there, except it's not automated. Prabhu, I think last words to you. What is it? I mean, you yourself. I mean, like we pointed out, you're wearing multiple hats: professor, researcher, startup founder. So, kind of, how do you what do you do in your downtime?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think all of the youngsters here should try to have something that balances you off. To me, I think the sheer variety of what I do itself balances me out, because I do startups, I am doing research, I am teaching. So last evening, for example, for a couple of hours, I switched off everything and I'm preparing for the class at 8 a.m. this morning.
Wow.
So
Intense.
I think that itself keeps me very refreshed, the diversity of things that I do. In a single day, I am doing fundamental research, I am interacting with startups, I am running a couple of organizations, and also preparing for class and marking answer scripts.
Right.
So I think that's very nice. And if I'm not doing any of this stuff, I'm watching Star Trek or Star Wars.
Awesome.
Keeps me grounded. Thank you.
Super. I hope that was an interesting session. Round of applause for our panelists, please.
Thank you, Manu. I think the event won't be complete without hearing Mr. Shankar, who facilitated actually the series. And may I request Shankar to come and share your thoughts on.
Thank you, Vijay. See, I consider myself incredibly blessed. I am at the junction of two organizations here, right? I have been associated with IIT now. I first entered the grounds of IIT 47 years ago today. I am associated, I am on the board of the Incubator, I am on the board of a couple of other groups in the IIT, and it gives me the greatest pleasure and greatest pride when Prabhu says 7 years in a row, IIT Madras has won the NIRF first ranking. But I'm also on the board of MMA, and only on Saturday we came to know that not the first, not the second, not the third, for the 14th time in a row, MMA has been awarded the #1 management association in India. So, Prabhu, IIT has got a ways to go, right? Seriously, the reason I keep bringing IIT people over here is IIT Madras is a jewel, is a very carefully hidden jewel. If you are associated with it, you will know the extent of work that is happening there, which is absolutely world class. The people who are there, their commitment to what they're doing, it's absolutely extraordinary. I think, at least for people like me who have the ability, I would like to showcase that institution to the public, and this is one of the ways in which I'm showcasing the institution to the public. Even more than IIT Madras, Research Park is a hidden jewel within a hidden jewel, which few people know of. No, of course, they are slowly waking up and showing themselves to the public. IIT Madras Research Park is on the agenda of every single dignitary who comes to Chennai. I can tell you that. From the Prime Minister downwards, G20, blah, blah, blah. Anything happens in Chennai, IIT Madras Research Park now is on their agenda. So, great job done, Tama. I will be amiss. You know, Prabhu talked about the contributions of the directors of IIT Madras, starting from Anand and then Bhaskar, and now Professor Kamakuti is the director. There has been a singularity of vision, and as Manu said, a continuity of policy and emphasis, which is what has led to the massive cultural shift inside IIT to make it from what it was 47 years ago when I went to what it is today. But I will be amiss if I don't point out and celebrate the role of Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala, who has actually done exactly the same thing for Research Park. Today, if Research Park and the Incubator are celebrated in India, it is the vision and the direction of Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala. He's not here today, but we all greatly respect him for what he has done. Tama, Prabhu, thank you for being here. And Manu, thank you for bringing out the best from these two young people. Malika.
Thank you, and we have over 800 viewers watching it online. A lot of questions, maybe next time. And we present a memento. MMA does a lot of CSR work with poor government children. The product which are made by children, that's what we give it to the thing, because you people are coming, that's the reason we are able to do so many things at so many places, because people recognize. Please, can you step forward and do the honor of accepting a moment?
Thank you, folks. They are available.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah.
reading start.